I sat in my car at 7:56 a.m., staring at the termination email that just destroyed my career at TechFlow Industries. The reason refusing to train Madison Whitfield, the 22-year-old daughter of their biggest shareholder, who couldn't code a basic loop to save her life. What they didn't know was that I had secretly filed patents for the core algorithms powering their $2.5 billion artificial intelligence system. 3 years of working nights to perfect code they thought belonged to them. Now they'd learn the real cost of underestimating me. 3 years ago, I walked through the glass doors of TechFlow Industries as Beryl Henderson, a 26-year-old junior developer with a computer science degree from UC Berkeley and dreams bigger than the cramped studio apartment I could barely afford in San Jose. The company occupied 4 floors of a sleek building in Silicon Valley's heart, all polished concrete and exposed steel beams designed to scream innovation and disruption. My interview had been a whirlwind. David Thompson, the chief technology officer, had grilled me for 2 hours on machine learning algorithms and data structures. I'd solved every problem he threw at me, even the trick questions designed to test how I handled pressure. When he offered me the position, his handshake was firm and his smile genuine. "We need people who can think outside the box," he'd said. "The future belongs to those who can see patterns others miss." I threw myself into the work with the intensity of someone who knew this was my shot. While other developers left at 5 p.m. sharp, I stayed until 8 or 9, diving deep into the company's existing codebase and identifying inefficiencies that had been overlooked for years. My supervisor, James Crawford, was a 43-year-old senior architect who'd been with the company since its startup days. He had a corner office with motivational posters about teamwork and a coffee mug that read "World's Greatest Programmer." During my first 6 months, I impressed everyone by optimizing database queries that improved system performance by 30%. By month 12, I'd been promoted to senior developer. James would pat my shoulder and tell other employees how lucky the company was to have found someone with my natural instincts for problem solving. But it was during those late nights alone in the office that I made my breakthrough. I'd been studying neural network architectures and noticed fundamental limitations in how existing systems processed complex data relationships. Traditional approaches required massive computational resources and still struggled with nuanced pattern recognition. I started experimenting with a hybrid model that combined deep learning with symbolic reasoning in ways no one had attempted before. The work consumed me. I'd arrive home at midnight, grab a few hours of sleep, and return by 6 a.m. to continue coding. My friends stopped inviting me to parties because they knew I'd decline. My dating life became non-existent. Every spare moment was devoted to perfecting algorithms that could revolutionize artificial intelligence. After 18 months of relentless development, I had created what would become the Phoenix AI system. The core architecture I designed could process natural language with unprecedented accuracy while maintaining the logical reasoning capabilities that previous systems lacked. It was elegant, efficient, and absolutely revolutionary. James started paying closer attention to my work around this time. He'd stop by my desk more frequently, asking detailed questions about my methodologies and requesting copies of my research notes. I was flattered by his interest and eager to share my discoveries with someone who understood their significance. "This is impressive work, Beryl," he'd say, studying my code with intense concentration. "You mind if I review these algorithms more thoroughly? I want to make sure we're implementing best practices." I trusted him completely. He was my supervisor, my mentor, the person responsible for guiding my professional development. When he suggested we collaborate more closely on the Phoenix project, I felt honored to have earned his respect. But then something strange began happening. In meetings with senior leadership, James would present ideas that sounded remarkably similar to concepts I'd developed during my late-night coding sessions. He'd explain complex algorithms with a fluency that surprised me, given his previous struggles with advanced machine learning concepts. The first time I noticed this, I dismissed it as coincidence. Maybe he'd been studying the same research papers I'd been reading. The second time, I felt a flicker of unease, but told myself I was being paranoid. The third time, during a presentation to potential investors, I watched James describe my hybrid neural architecture as though he'd conceived it himself. My stomach dropped as the pieces clicked into place. Every breakthrough I'd shared with him, every innovative approach I'd developed, every line of code I'd written was being presented as his original work. The man I'd trusted was systematically stealing my intellectual property and taking credit for my innovations. After that presentation, I confronted him in his office. James, the algorithm you described today is identical to the one I developed last month. You remember the one I showed you in my research notes? He leaned back in his leather chair, his expression shifting from friendly mentorship to cold calculation. Beryl, I think you're confused about the collaborative nature of our work here. All development happens as part of our team effort. Individual contributions get incorporated into larger projects, but you presented it as your own idea. You didn't mention my involvement at all. Look, he said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. You're young and talented, but you need to understand how this industry works. Ideas belong to the company, not individuals. Your job is to contribute to our collective success, not to seek personal glory. I left his office feeling sick. Everything I'd worked for, every sleepless night and weekend spent perfecting my code, was being erased from existence. My contributions were becoming invisible, while James built his reputation on my innovations. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I researched intellectual property law and contacted a patent attorney named Rebecca Foster. If the company wouldn't acknowledge my work, I'd protect it through legal channels they knew nothing about. Working in absolute secrecy, I began filing provisional patents for every algorithm and innovative approach I'd developed. I used my personal email, paid the fees from my savings account, and met with Rebecca in coffee shops far from the office. Each patent application was meticulously documented with timestamps, code samples, and detailed explanations of my methodologies. The process took months of careful preparation. I had to prove independent development and establish clear timelines showing my work predated any company documentation. Rebecca warned me about the risks, but I was determined to protect what was rightfully mine. Meanwhile, James continued building his reputation on my stolen work, presenting himself as the brilliant mind behind TechFlow's most promising artificial intelligence platform. He received a promotion to principal architect and a $50,000 bonus for his groundbreaking contributions to machine learning. I watched it all happen while quietly building an intellectual property portfolio that would eventually prove who really created the Phoenix AI system. Madison Whitfield arrived at TechFlow Industries on a Tuesday morning in March, making an entrance that announced her importance to anyone within a 50-foot radius. She stepped out of a white Tesla Model S wearing a designer blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent, carrying a Chanel handbag, and checking her iPhone in a diamond-studded case. Her father, Robert Whitfield, owned Whitfield Industries, a massive investment firm that held a 40% stake in TechFlow. This made Madison untouchable despite having zero qualifications for working at a technology company. She possessed a liberal arts degree from an expensive private college and had spent the previous 2 years finding herself through Instagram-worthy vacations to exotic locations. David Thompson called me into his office that afternoon with an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Beryl, we have a special project for you. Madison Whitfield will be joining our AI development team, and we need someone experienced to help her get up to speed. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. She's joining the AI development team. What's her technical background? David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Well, she's eager to learn and has expressed strong interest in artificial intelligence. Her father feels this would be valuable experience for her professional development. David, AI development requires years of specialized training. You can't just throw someone into machine learning algorithms without foundational knowledge in computer science and mathematics. I understand your concerns, but this comes from the highest levels of the company. Robert Whitfield specifically requested that we provide his daughter with meaningful work experience. He believes she has untapped potential in technology. The unspoken message was clear: Madison's father could destroy the company if his demands weren't met. This wasn't about qualifications or merit. This was about keeping their biggest investor happy, regardless of the impact on actual productivity or team dynamics. I spent the next week preparing training materials suitable for someone with no technical background. I created simplified explanations of programming concepts, gathered beginner-friendly resources, and developed a curriculum that could theoretically bring a motivated person up to basic competency over several months. Madison's first day of training revealed the true scope of the challenge ahead. She arrived 30 minutes late carrying a venti Starbucks drink and apologizing with a bright smile that suggested punctuality was more of a suggestion than a requirement. Sorry, traffic was absolutely crazy. And then I had to take this call from my yoga instructor about rescheduling next week's session. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was, but I smiled politely and began with the most basic concepts I could imagine. Let's start with fundamental programming principles. Have you ever written any code before? Oh, I did some HTML in college, made a cute website for my sorority's charity event. Does that count? HTML wasn't programming, but I pressed forward. Great, that's a start. Today we'll learn about variables and data types. In programming, a variable is like a container that holds information. For the next 2 hours, I watched Madison's eyes glaze over as I explained concepts that first-year computer science students master in their initial weeks. She took notes on expensive stationery, occasionally asking questions that revealed fundamental misunderstandings about how computers actually worked. So when you say the computer remembers the variable, where does it keep that information, like in its brain? By the end of the first week, it became clear that Madison had no genuine interest in learning programming. She viewed her position as a temporary obligation, something to endure until she could move on to more appealing opportunities. Her questions were superficial. Her attention span lasted approximately 15 minutes, and she frequently interrupted training sessions to take personal phone calls. Oh my God, Jessica. Did you see what happened on The Bachelor last night? I literally cannot believe she chose him over. Madison, we're in the middle of discussing loop structures. Right, sorry. But seriously, this is important. Can we take like a 5-minute break? The 5-minute break became 20 minutes, and when she returned, we had to restart from the beginning, because she'd forgotten everything we'd covered before the interruption. After 2 weeks of minimal progress, I suggested to James Crawford that Madison might benefit from more foundational computer science coursework before attempting advanced AI development. His response was swift and unambiguous. Beryl, your job is to make this work. Madison's success reflects directly on our department's ability to develop talent. Figure out how to bring her up to speed. I intensified my efforts creating even more simplified explanations and hands-on exercises. I broke down complex concepts into smaller pieces, used visual aids and analogies, and provided constant encouragement. But Madison's fundamental lack of interest remained unchanged. During our 3rd week, I attempted to teach her about basic programming loops. Madison A for loop allows us to repeat code multiple times. It's essential for processing large amounts of data. She stared at the screen with obvious frustration. This is so confusing. Can't you just write the code and show me how it works? I learn better by watching. The only way to understand programming is by practicing. You need to write code yourself to internalize these concepts. But that's so time-consuming. Look, I have this important lunch meeting with some friends who are starting a wellness brand. Could you maybe just code this part and I'll study it later tonight? This became the pattern. Madison would ask increasingly direct questions about having me complete her work while she attended social obligations that somehow always seemed more pressing than learning artificial intelligence development. 1 month into her training, I overheard a phone conversation that changed my understanding of the entire situation. Madison was in the break room speaking loudly enough that anyone nearby could hear her side of the discussion. Daddy, this is taking forever. The woman they assigned to train me keeps insisting I actually learn programming, but that's not what we discussed. I thought you said I'd be working with existing systems, not building them from scratch. She paused, listening to her father's response. Well, can't you just tell them to give me access to whatever they're working on? I mean, you practically own this company. Why should I waste months learning things I'll never actually use? Another pause. Fine, but I'm not spending my entire summer doing homework assignments. There has to be a faster way to get the information we need. The conversation ended and Madison returned to her desk with renewed determination. But instead of focusing on learning programming concepts, she began asking different types of questions. Beryl, can you show me the actual code for the Phoenix AI system? I think seeing real examples would help me understand the concepts better. The Phoenix system is proprietary technology. Access to that codebase requires security clearance and specific project assignment. But I'm part of the AI development team now. Shouldn't I have access to the systems I'm supposed to be working on? Madison, you're still in basic training. The Phoenix system represents years of advanced development. You need to master fundamental programming before you can contribute to something that complex. Her frustration became more apparent after this conversation. She started arriving later, leaving earlier, and showing even less interest in the training materials I'd prepared. Instead, she focused on asking questions about company systems, project timelines, and technical documentation that was far beyond her current level. During our 6th week, everything came into sharp focus. I was working late one evening when I heard voices from the conference room next to my desk. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Madison speaking with someone on a video call. "It's more complicated than we thought, Daddy. She won't just give me the code. She keeps saying I need to earn access and demonstrate competency. It's like she doesn't understand who we are." Robert Whitfield's voice came through the laptop speakers. "Madison, we've discussed this. The Phoenix AI system is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. We need to understand how it works before the acquisition moves forward." Acquisition. What acquisition? Never mind that for now. Focus on getting closer to this Beryl Henderson. Find out everything you can about her development process. We need to know exactly how she built those algorithms. My blood turned cold as the implications became clear. Madison wasn't at TechFlow to learn artificial intelligence development. She was there to steal my work to extract information about the Phoenix system for her father's investment firm. This wasn't incompetence or entitlement. This was corporate espionage disguised as nepotism. The next morning, I requested a meeting with David Thompson and Sarah Kim from Human Resources. It was time to address what was really happening with Madison Whitfield's training program. The meeting took place in TechFlow's largest conference room, a sterile space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Silicon Valley landscape. I sat across from David Thompson and Sarah Kim, both of whom wore expressions that suggested they already knew this conversation would be difficult. I need to discuss serious concerns about Madison Whitfield's training program. I began keeping my voice professional despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. After 6 weeks of intensive instruction, she has demonstrated no progress in learning basic programming concepts. More importantly, I believe she's been assigned to this position under false pretenses. Sarah leaned forward, her notebook open and pen ready. "Can you elaborate on what you mean by false pretenses?" Madison has repeatedly expressed frustration with actually learning to code. Instead, she focuses on gaining access to proprietary systems and asking questions about our development processes that have nothing to do with education. I believe she's attempting to extract information about our artificial intelligence technology for purposes unrelated to legitimate training. David's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation, Beryl. What evidence do you have to support this claim?" I detailed the conversations I'd overheard Madison's consistent pattern of avoiding actual learning while seeking access to sensitive systems and her father's obvious interest in our AI development beyond what would be normal for an investor. As I spoke, both David and Sarah exchanged glances that told me they weren't entirely surprised by my observations. "Look," David said when I finished, "we understand your frustration, but Madison comes highly recommended by Robert Whitfield, who has been instrumental in our company's growth. He specifically requested that we provide his daughter with comprehensive exposure to our AI development processes. Comprehensive exposure to proprietary technology that took years to develop. David, she can't write a basic loop. How can she possibly contribute to advanced artificial intelligence systems?" "Perhaps your teaching methods need adjustment," Sarah suggested. "Different people learn in different ways. Maybe Madison would benefit from a more hands-on approach, working directly with existing systems rather than theoretical exercises." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were essentially asking me to give an unqualified nepotism hire, direct access to my most valuable intellectual property, because she was too lazy or uninterested to learn the fundamentals that would justify such access. I refused to compromise the security of our development environment by giving someone without proper qualifications access to sensitive systems. Madison needs to demonstrate basic competency before she can work with production code. The room fell silent. David drummed his fingers on the conference table while Sarah scribbled notes with increasing intensity. Finally, David spoke. Beryl, I need you to understand the bigger picture here. Robert Whitfield isn't just an investor. His firm represents our pathway to major growth opportunities. Keeping him satisfied directly impacts every employee's job security and future prospects. So you're asking me to prioritize politics over technical competence and security protocols. I'm asking you to be flexible and find creative solutions that meet everyone's needs. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened and Madison herself walked in, followed by a man I recognized from company photos as Robert Whitfield. He was in his early 50s, wearing an expensive suit and projecting the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of making decisions that affected thousands of people. I hope you don't mind the interruption, he said, his voice smooth and controlled. Madison mentioned there were some challenges with her training program, and I thought it might be helpful if I participated in this discussion directly. David immediately stood up. Mr. Whitfield, of course. Please have a seat. We were just discussing how to optimize Madison's learning experience. Robert Whitfield settled into the chair at the head of the conference table, a position that clearly established his dominance in the room. Madison sat beside him, no longer looking like the scattered young woman who couldn't understand programming loops. Her posture was straighter, her expression more focused and calculating. Ms. Henderson, Robert said, turning his attention to me. I understand you have concerns about Madison's progress. I appreciate your dedication to thoroughness, but I wonder if you fully grasp the unique opportunity we're discussing here. I'm not sure what you mean. Madison isn't here for conventional training. She's being prepared for a leadership role that will require deep understanding of your artificial intelligence capabilities. The traditional approach of starting with basic programming might not be the most efficient path toward that goal. The way he said your artificial intelligence capabilities sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. He wasn't talking about company technology or team achievements. He was specifically referencing my personal contributions to the Phoenix system. Mr. Whitfield, effective leadership in technology requires foundational understanding of the underlying systems. Without that knowledge, it's impossible to make informed decisions about artificial intelligence development. Perhaps, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. But Madison has other strengths that might be more valuable than coding ability. She has a talent for understanding complex relationships and identifying opportunities that others miss. Madison nodded enthusiastically. Exactly, I'm more of a big picture person. Instead of getting bogged down in technical details, I focus on strategic thinking and connecting different elements together. Which is why, Robert continued, we think Madison would benefit more from working directly with your Phoenix system. Hands-on experience with real technology rather than artificial exercises. I felt the walls closing in around me. This wasn't a request. It was a demand backed by financial leverage that could destroy the company if denied. But I also knew that giving Madison access to the Phoenix system would be like handing over years of my work to someone who had no intention of using it for legitimate purposes. I cannot provide access to proprietary development systems without proper authorization and demonstrated competency. Security protocols exist for good reasons. Robert's expression hardened. Ms. Henderson, I think you're overcomplicating this situation. Madison is now part of your development team. She needs access to the systems she'll be working on. It's really quite simple. It's not simple at all. The Phoenix AI system represents millions of dollars in research and development. Access requires security clearance, technical qualifications, and specific project assignments, none of which Madison currently possesses. Then perhaps it's time to reconsider those requirements, Sarah interjected. Company policies should support business objectives, not create unnecessary barriers. I looked around the room and realized I was completely outnumbered. David avoided eye contact. Sarah was clearly following orders from above. Madison sat smugly, waiting for her victory, and Robert Whitfield radiated the quiet confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. Let me be absolutely clear, I said, standing up from my chair. I will not compromise security protocols or provide unqualified personnel with access to sensitive systems. If the company wants to override those decisions, it will have to do so without my participation. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. Ms. Henderson, I hope you understand the implications of that position. TechFlow Industries exists in a competitive environment where cooperation and flexibility are essential for survival. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Companies that can't adapt to changing circumstances tend to struggle. Employees who can't support their company's strategic objectives often find themselves seeking opportunities elsewhere. The threat was clear, but carefully phrased to avoid direct confrontation. Madison smiled openly now, no longer bothering to hide her satisfaction with how the conversation was progressing. I need to make a phone call, David said, suddenly standing up and leaving the room. Sarah followed him, muttering something about checking company policies. That left me alone with Robert and Madison Whitfield, which was clearly their intention. Beryl, Robert said, his tone becoming more conversational. Let's speak frankly. You've built something remarkable with the Phoenix system. Madison has told me about the sophisticated algorithms and innovative approaches you've developed. That kind of talent deserves recognition and appropriate compensation. What are you talking about? I'm talking about opportunities beyond what TechFlow can offer. My investment firm works with companies across multiple industries. Someone with your capabilities could have a very bright future with the right support and resources. Madison leaned forward eagerly. Daddy's company has amazing projects. Much more interesting than this place, and the pay is incredible. I realized they were trying to buy me to offer carrots instead of sticks if I would cooperate with their plan to access the Phoenix system. But I also understood something they didn't. I held cards they couldn't see. Thank you for the offer, but I'm committed to my work here at TechFlow. Robert's expression shifted back to businesslike coldness. I see. Well, I hope that commitment proves to be mutually beneficial. It would be unfortunate if circumstances forced you to reconsider your position. At that moment, David returned to the conference room, his face pale and his movements tense. He was followed by a man I didn't recognize, someone in an expensive suit who carried himself with the authority of senior management. Mr. Whitfield, David said, his voice strained. I'd like you to meet Marcus Goldman, our Chief Executive Officer. Marcus Goldman extended his hand to Robert Whitfield with a smile that looked genuine but felt calculated. Robert, always a pleasure. I understand we're discussing Madison's integration into our AI development team. That's correct. We're working through some procedural details about system access and training protocols. Marcus turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ms. Henderson, I appreciate your dedication to security and proper procedures. However, I need you to understand that Madison's success here is a high priority for our organization. I'm confident we can find an approach that meets everyone's needs. The message was clear. Find a way to give Madison what she wanted or face the consequences. But as I looked around the room at these powerful people who thought they could manipulate me into surrendering years of my work, I felt a calm determination settle over me. They had no idea what was coming. The termination email arrived at exactly 7:56 a.m. on a Thursday morning, while I sat in my car in TechFlow's parking lot. I'd arrived early to prepare for another difficult day of dealing with Madison's demands and management's increasing pressure to compromise security protocols. The subject line read, Immediate termination of employment, Beryl Henderson. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the message on my phone. Dear Ms. Henderson, effective immediately, your employment with TechFlow Industries is terminated. This decision is based on your inability to work collaboratively with team members and your refusal to support company objectives. Your access to all systems has been revoked, and security will escort you from the building to collect your personal belongings. You are required to return all company property and sign the attached confidentiality and non-compete agreements. Failure to comply will result in legal action. The message was signed by Sarah Kim from Human Resources and copied to David Thompson, Marcus Goldman, and James Crawford. No mention of the years I'd spent building the Phoenix system, the countless nights I'd worked to perfect algorithms that made the company millions, or the dedication I'd shown to legitimate security protocols. I sat in stunned silence for several minutes, watching other employees arrive for what they assumed would be a normal workday. Cars pulled into parking spaces around me, while people chatted on their phones or finished their coffee before heading inside. None of them knew that their most valuable artificial intelligence technology had just lost its primary architect. My phone buzzed with a text message from Angela Martinez, one of the few developers I trusted. "Security is looking for you. They have a box with your stuff. What happened?" I typed back. "Fired for refusing to give Madison Whitfield access to Phoenix. Don't text me about this again. They're probably monitoring communications." Angela's response was immediate. "This is insane. Everyone knows you built that system." But knowing and being able to prove it were different things. Or so they thought. I gathered my courage and walked through TechFlow's front doors for what would be the last time as an employee. The security guard at the reception desk, a friendly man named Robert, who usually greeted me with questions about my weekend plans, now looked uncomfortable and avoided eye contact. "Ms. Henderson, I need you to wait here. Someone from HR will be down shortly." Within minutes, Sarah Kim appeared with a cardboard box containing my personal belongings and 2 security guards I didn't recognize. The entire lobby felt like a stage set for my humiliation, with other employees pretending not to stare, while obviously wondering what I'd done to deserve such treatment. "Beryl, I need you to sign these documents," Sarah said, setting a folder on the reception desk. "The confidentiality agreement prevents you from discussing any proprietary information or development processes. The non-compete clause restricts your ability to work for competing companies for 18 months. I flipped through the documents, noting clauses that would essentially prevent me from working in artificial intelligence development anywhere in Silicon Valley. The confidentiality terms were so broad, they would prohibit me from even mentioning that I'd worked on AI systems at TechFlow. "I'm not signing anything without legal review," I said. Sarah's expression tightened. "Beryl, these are standard agreements. Refusing to sign could result in additional legal complications that would be expensive and time-consuming to resolve. Are you threatening me with frivolous lawsuits if I don't surrender my legal rights?" "I'm explaining the consequences of non-cooperation." One of the security guards cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need to complete the escort process. Other employees are arriving for work." I looked around the lobby and saw Madison Whitfield emerging from the elevator, wearing another expensive outfit and carrying a tablet that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She approached our group with obvious satisfaction, no longer bothering to hide her pleasure with how events had unfolded. "Oh, Beryl, I'm so sorry to hear about this. I really tried to make our training sessions work, but sometimes personality conflicts just can't be resolved." Her voice dripped with false sympathy. "Madison, you never had any intention of learning artificial intelligence development. This was about gaining access to proprietary technology for your father's business interests." "I don't know what you're talking about. I was just trying to contribute to the team and learn new skills." James Crawford appeared beside Madison, his expression a mixture of smugness and feigned regret. "Beryl, I wish things could have worked out differently, but attitude and teamwork are just as important as technical skills in this industry." The irony was overwhelming. The man who'd stolen my work for years was lecturing me about teamwork while standing next to someone whose only qualification was her father's investment portfolio. "James, you know exactly who developed the Phoenix system. You know whose algorithms you've been presenting as your own work for the past 18 months. I think you're confused about the collaborative nature of our development process. All team contributions get integrated into larger projects." Sarah stepped between us. "This conversation is inappropriate and counterproductive. Beryl, you need to finish the exit process and leave the premises." As the security guards escorted me toward the parking lot, I heard James speaking to Madison behind us. "Don't worry about her accusations. She's obviously bitter about being terminated, but the company owns all intellectual property developed by employees. There won't be any legal issues." But as we walked past the executive offices, I caught a fragment of conversation that changed everything. David Thompson was on a phone call, his voice loud enough to carry through his partially open door. No, she'll be part of the transition team. Ms. Henderson is the primary architect of the Phoenix system. The acquiring company specifically wants her expertise during the integration process. Without her knowledge of the underlying algorithms, the technology transfer would be much more complicated. I stopped walking so abruptly that the security guard behind me nearly bumped into my back. David was discussing me with someone as though I'd be staying with the company, as though my termination was temporary or fictional. But more importantly, he was talking about an acquisition, a sale of the Phoenix technology that I knew nothing about. "Ma'am, you need to keep moving," the security guard said gently. I continued toward the parking lot, but my mind was racing. David had mentioned an acquiring company that wanted my expertise specifically. This meant the Phoenix system was being sold probably for an enormous sum, and the buyers expected me to be part of the package. Nobody at TechFlow had informed me about any acquisition discussions. They'd fired me while simultaneously planning to include my expertise as part of the deal terms. The hypocrisy was staggering, but it also revealed how desperate they were to maintain the illusion that they owned technology they'd never actually developed. As I reached my car, I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca Foster, my patent attorney. Her assistant answered on the second ring. "Rebecca Foster's office, this is Jennifer. How can I help you?" "This is Beryl Henderson. I need an emergency consultation with Rebecca. Something major has happened with TechFlow Industries. She's in court this morning, but I can have her call you as soon as she's available." "Is this regarding your patent applications?" "Yes, and it's urgent. Tell her TechFlow just terminated my employment while apparently planning to sell the Phoenix technology to another company. The situation has escalated significantly." Jennifer's tone became more serious. "I'll make sure she gets this message immediately. Can you be available for a call around noon?" "Absolutely. And Jennifer, tell her to start preparing for a major intellectual property dispute." Things are about to get very complicated for TechFlow Industries. As I drove away from the company parking lot, I felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and anticipation. They thought they'd gotten rid of a problem employee who was too stubborn to compromise security protocols for political convenience. What they'd actually done was eliminate the only person who could legally authorize use of the technology they were planning to sell. The Phoenix AI system was about to become their most expensive mistake. Rebecca Foster's law office occupied the 32nd floor of a glass tower in downtown San Francisco with sweeping views of the bay that normally would have impressed me. But on this particular Thursday afternoon, I was too focused on the documents spread across her conference table to appreciate the scenery. "Beryl, what you've accomplished here is extraordinary," Rebecca said, reviewing the patent filings we'd prepared over the past 18 months. "These applications cover every critical component of the Phoenix AI system. The foundational architecture, the hybrid learning algorithms, the natural language processing improvements, and the optimization protocols." She was a sharp woman in her early 40s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of focused intensity that made her one of Silicon Valley's most respected intellectual property attorneys. We'd worked together carefully and methodically, documenting every innovation with timestamps, code samples, and detailed technical explanations. "The key question," she continued, "is whether TechFlow has any legitimate claim to this technology. You developed everything during your employment there, which typically means the company owns intellectual property created by its workers. But I did all the innovative work on my own time, using my personal equipment and research resources. The breakthroughs came during evenings and weekends when I was exploring concepts beyond my assigned duties." Rebecca nodded. "That's crucial. Your employment contract includes standard intellectual property assignment clauses, but they're limited to work performed within the scope of your job responsibilities. The Phoenix system represents research you conducted independently, building on your own theoretical insights." She pulled up files on her laptop displaying patent application timelines and supporting documentation. "More importantly, you filed provisional patents before TechFlow incorporated your work into their commercial systems. This establishes priority and demonstrates independent development." My phone buzzed with text messages, but I ignored them. Angela Martinez had been trying to reach me all morning, probably with updates about the chaos my departure had created at the company. "Rebecca, there's something else. I overheard a conversation suggesting that TechFlow is planning to sell the Phoenix technology to another company. They're apparently representing me as part of the transition team, even though they fired me this morning." Her eyebrows shot up. "They're planning to sell technology while claiming your ongoing involvement. That's incredibly problematic from a legal standpoint." "Why?" "Because if your patents are as comprehensive as they appear to be, TechFlow doesn't actually own the technology they're trying to sell. They've been using your innovations under the assumption of employment-based ownership, but that assumption might not be legally valid. Rebecca spent the next hour reviewing each patent application in detail, cross-referencing them with the Phoenix Systems technical architecture. Her expression grew more serious as she worked. Beryl, I need to ask you something important. How much of the Phoenix system could TechFlow recreate without your specific algorithms and approaches? I thought about the question carefully. Very little. The entire platform is built around innovations I developed. The core architecture, the learning protocols, the data processing methods. Everything distinctive about Phoenix came from my research. So without your patented technology, they'd essentially have an empty shell. Worse than that, they'd have a system that doesn't work. The components are so integrated that removing my innovations would leave them with incompatible fragments. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. Beryl, I think you need to understand the full implications of what you've created here. These patents don't just protect some of your work. They protect virtually everything that makes the Phoenix system valuable. She turned her laptop screen toward me, displaying a diagram that mapped my patent claims against Phoenix's technical components. Nearly every major element of the system fell under intellectual property protection I controlled. This means TechFlow has been building a commercial product around technology they don't actually own. Every license they've sold, every demonstration they've given, every contract they've signed has been based on unauthorized use of your patented innovations. The magnitude of the situation was starting to sink in. What happens now? Now we send them a cease and desist letter that will probably give their entire legal department heart attacks. But first, I need you to help me understand something. You mentioned they're planning to sell Phoenix to another company. Do you know any details about the potential buyer or the terms of the deal? I told her about the conversation I'd overheard between David Thompson and whoever he'd been speaking with on the phone. Rebecca took detailed notes occasionally, asking for clarification about specific phrases or technical details. This is perfect, she said finally. If TechFlow is actively marketing technology they don't own to potential buyers, we have grounds for immediate injunctive relief. We can stop the sale and demand an accounting of all revenue generated using your patents. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed Angela Martinez's number. Given the urgency of her previous text messages, I decided to answer. Angela, what's happening over there? Beryl, everything is falling apart. The acquisition team from Megacorp came in for technical due diligence this morning, and they're asking incredibly detailed questions about the Phoenix algorithms that nobody here can answer. What kind of questions? They want to understand the mathematical foundations of the hybrid learning model, the optimization protocols for large data set processing, and the error correction mechanisms in the natural language interface. James has been frantically searching through documentation, but he can't explain how any of it actually works. I put the call on speaker so Rebecca could hear. Angela, who's representing the company in these discussions. That's the problem. David keeps telling the Megacorp team that you'll be available to answer technical questions as part of the transition process. But obviously, you're not here anymore, and nobody else understands the system well enough to provide meaningful explanations. Rebecca scribbled notes furiously. Angela, this is Rebecca Foster Beryl's attorney. Can you tell me anything about the proposed acquisition terms? I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but I'm so frustrated with how they've treated Beryl. The deal is worth $2.5 billion. Megacorp specifically wants the Phoenix AI technology, and they've made the acquisition contingent on retaining key technical personnel. Key technical personnel meaning Beryl. Exactly. They want her to lead the integration process and continue developing the platform under their ownership. The contract includes specific provisions about maintaining the development team responsible for Phoenix. After Angela hung up, Rebecca and I sat in silence for several minutes, processing what we'd learned. TechFlow was attempting to sell my technology for $2.5 billion, while claiming I'd be part of the package, despite having fired me for refusing to compromise security protocols. Rebecca, what happens if we stop this acquisition? Depends on the contract terms, but typically failed deals of this magnitude include significant penalties for the seller. If TechFlow can't deliver the technology or personnel they've promised, they could be liable for hundreds of millions in damages. And what happens to the employees who had nothing to do with this situation? Her expression softened. That's the difficult part. Stopping a major acquisition often leads to layoffs and financial instability for companies. Innocent people get hurt when leadership makes bad decisions. I stared out the conference room windows at the San Francisco skyline, thinking about Angela and the other developers who'd worked hard to build TechFlow into a successful company. They didn't deserve to lose their jobs because of management's greed and dishonesty. Rebecca, is there a way to resolve this that protects the employees while still ensuring I get recognition and compensation for my work? Possibly. We could negotiate a licensing agreement that allows TechFlow to continue using your patents while paying appropriate royalties. Or we could explore having you return to the company in a leadership role that gives you control over the technology you created. What would you recommend? She gathered the patent documents into neat stacks, her expression thoughtful. First, we send the cease and desist letter to establish your legal position clearly. Then we see how they respond. Companies facing $2.5 billion deals tend to become very motivated to find creative solutions. And if they refuse to negotiate reasonably, Rebecca smiled with the confidence of someone who'd won similar battles before. Then we shut down their acquisition and let them explain to their shareholders why they lost the biggest deal in company history, because they tried to steal technology from their most talented developer. The cease and desist letter arrived at TechFlow Industries via certified mail on Friday morning at exactly 9 a.m., precisely when Rebecca calculated it would cause maximum disruption to their acquisition negotiations. By 10:15, my phone was ringing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them go to voicemail. The first message was from Marcus Goldman himself. Beryl, this is Marcus Goldman from TechFlow. I need to speak with you immediately about some legal documents we've received. Please call me back as soon as possible. The second was from David Thompson, his voice strained and desperate. Beryl, there seems to be some misunderstanding about intellectual property ownership. Can we schedule a meeting to discuss this situation? I'm confident we can resolve any concerns you might have. The third was from a lawyer I'd never heard of representing TechFlow's legal department. Ms. Henderson, this is Patricia Wells from Morrison Klein & Associates. We represent TechFlow Industries regarding your recent patent claims. We need to discuss this matter urgently to avoid unnecessary legal complications. Rebecca had warned me this would happen. They'll try everything to avoid acknowledging the strength of your position, she'd said. Panic threats, attempted negotiations, legal intimidation. Don't respond to anything without me present. By noon, the story had reached the technology press. Tech News published an article titled, TechFlow Acquisition in Jeopardy Over Patent Dispute, with details that could only have come from someone inside either company. Sources familiar with the matter report that TechFlow Industries' pending $2.5 billion acquisition by Megacorp has been suspended following patent infringement claims by a former employee. The dispute apparently centers on artificial intelligence technology that represents the core value of the proposed deal. The article included quotes from industry analysts expressing concern about the implications for both companies. One expert noted that intellectual property disputes of this magnitude can take years to resolve and often result in significant financial penalties for all parties involved. My phone continued ringing throughout the afternoon. Angela Martinez called with updates about the chaos unfolding at TechFlow's offices. Beryl, it's complete pandemonium here. The Megacorp team left without explanation. Marcus Goldman has been in emergency meetings all day, and there are lawyers everywhere. James Crawford looks like he's about to have a nervous breakdown. What's happening with the technical staff? That's what's really scary. Nobody knows if the acquisition is still happening, and people are starting to worry about layoffs. Sarah Kim sent out an email about maintaining normal operations, while leadership addresses external challenges. But everyone knows that's corporate speak for we're in serious trouble. Angela, I want you to know that I'm not trying to hurt the people who work there. This is about getting recognition for my work and stopping people from stealing intellectual property. I know that, and most of the technical team understands what really happened. We all know you built the Phoenix system. The problem is that if this acquisition falls through, the company might not survive financially. After Angela hung up, I spent the evening researching TechFlow's financial situation and the potential consequences of a failed acquisition. The company had taken on significant debt to fund expansion banking on the Megacorp deal to provide capital for growth and development. Without that infusion of cash, they'd be forced to cut costs dramatically, which typically meant laying off employees and scaling back operations. The people who'd worked hard to build innovative technology would pay the price for management's dishonest decisions about intellectual property ownership. On Saturday morning, Rebecca called with an update about TechFlow's response to our cease and desist letter. They're claiming that all Phoenix technology was developed within the scope of your employment and therefore belongs to the company under standard intellectual property assignment clauses. They're also asserting that your patent applications are invalid because the innovations weren't actually independent of your work duties. How strong is their position? Weak, but they're desperate enough to fight. Their legal team is probably advising them that challenging your patents, even unsuccessfully, could delay resolution long enough to salvage the acquisition somehow. What's our next step? We file for a temporary restraining order to prevent any sale or licensing of the Phoenix technology pending resolution of the ownership dispute. We also demand that TechFlow provide a complete accounting of revenue generated using your patents. Rebecca, what happens to TechFlow's employees if we push forward aggressively? There was a pause. Beryl, I understand your concern for innocent people, but companies that steal intellectual property need to face consequences. If we let TechFlow slide, it sends a message to every other company that they can build businesses on stolen technology without serious repercussions. She was right, but that didn't make me feel better about the potential collateral damage. I'd spent 3 years working alongside talented developers who'd contributed their own innovations to Phoenix's success. They deserved better than becoming casualties in a legal war they hadn't started. Sunday evening, my phone rang with a call from Robert Whitfield himself. Ms. Henderson, this is Robert Whitfield. I think we need to have a conversation about the current situation. Mr. Whitfield, anything you want to discuss should go through my attorney. Please just give me 5 minutes. I believe there might be opportunities for mutually beneficial resolution that would be better for everyone involved. Against my better judgment, I agreed to listen. Beryl, I want to acknowledge that perhaps we approached your situation at TechFlow incorrectly. Madison's training program clearly wasn't structured appropriately, and management's response to your concerns was inadequate. Mr. Whitfield, your daughter was sent to extract information about proprietary technology for your investment firm's benefit. This wasn't about training or career development. You're right, and I apologize for that deception. But consider this: the Phoenix AI system has tremendous potential that extends far beyond what TechFlow can achieve independently. With proper resources and strategic partnerships, your innovations could impact millions of people positively. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we work together to find a solution that recognizes your contributions while allowing the Phoenix technology to reach its full potential. My firm has connections with major technology companies, research institutions, and government agencies that could benefit from your innovations. In exchange for what? In exchange for reasonable licensing terms that provide you with significant ongoing royalties while allowing TechFlow to complete the Megacorp acquisition. Everyone wins. You get recognition and financial compensation. TechFlow's employees keep their jobs and society benefits from continued Phoenix development. After he hung up, I sat thinking about his proposal. It was appealing in many ways, offering financial security while protecting innocent employees from the consequences of their leadership's poor decisions. But it also felt like rewarding the people who tried to steal my work and humiliate me for defending my intellectual property rights. Rebecca called Monday morning with news that would force a decision. Beryl, I just heard from TechFlow's legal team. They're prepared to offer a settlement that includes recognition of your patent ownership licensing terms for Phoenix technology and a significant financial package. What kind of financial package? $20 million upfront, plus ongoing royalties of 15% on all Phoenix-related revenue. They're also offering you the position of Chief Technology Officer, with full control over artificial intelligence development. And if I refuse, then we proceed with litigation, that could take years to resolve, during which time the Phoenix technology can't be sold or licensed by anyone. TechFlow probably goes bankrupt, hundreds of employees lose their jobs, and you might ultimately receive nothing if there's no company left to pay damages. I had 24 hours to decide between accepting recognition and compensation or pursuing complete victory that might destroy everything I'd worked to build. The negotiation meeting took place in TechFlow's main conference room on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. sharp. Everyone who'd been involved in the dispute was present. Robert Whitfield Madison, Marcus Goldman, David Thompson, Sarah Kim James Crawford, and the various lawyers who'd been working frantically to prevent their $2.5 billion deal from collapsing entirely. I entered the room accompanied by Rebecca Foster, carrying a folder containing the settlement terms we'd spent hours refining. The atmosphere was tense but professional, with none of the hostility or manipulation that had characterized our previous interactions. Marcus Goldman stood to greet us. Beryl, Rebecca, thank you for coming. I think we all recognize that the current situation isn't sustainable for anyone involved. We need to find a path forward that acknowledges everyone's legitimate interests. Rebecca placed our proposal on the conference table. Our client is prepared to consider a comprehensive settlement that resolves all intellectual property disputes while protecting the interests of TechFlow's employees and stakeholders. Robert Whitfield leaned forward, studying the document. What are the primary terms? First, I said, taking control of the conversation. Formal recognition that I am the inventor and owner of all patents covering the Phoenix AI system's core technology. This includes public acknowledgement of my contributions and correction of any previous misrepresentations about the system's development. James Crawford shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but didn't interrupt. Second, a licensing agreement that allows TechFlow to continue using and developing Phoenix technology in exchange for appropriate royalties. The terms include 25% of all revenue directly attributable to Phoenix-derived products and services. David Thompson looked up sharply. 25%. That's significantly higher than the 15% we discussed. The additional 10% represents compensation for the 18 months of unauthorized use and the attempt to sell technology without proper ownership rights, Rebecca explained. It's actually quite reasonable considering the potential damages for willful patent infringement. Third, I continued my appointment as Chief Technology Officer with full authority over artificial intelligence research and development. This includes the right to approve all technical hires, establish development priorities, and control access to sensitive systems. Marcus Goldman nodded slowly. That seems reasonable given your expertise and contributions. What about the management structure and reporting relationships? I'll report directly to you as CEO with no intermediate oversight from other executives. The AI development team will be restructured to support innovation rather than politics. Madison Whitfield spoke for the first time. What happens to my position at the company? I looked at her directly. Madison, you'll be transferred to an entry-level business development role appropriate for your qualifications and interests. You'll receive proper training in business strategy and client relationships, which seem better suited to your strengths than technical development. She appeared relieved rather than disappointed. The past weeks had clearly demonstrated that artificial intelligence programming wasn't her passion or talent. Fourth, a comprehensive review of company policies regarding intellectual property, employee recognition, and ethical business practices. We'll implement systems that prevent future disputes and ensure proper attribution of technical contributions. Sarah Kim made notes frantically. What about the current acquisition negotiations with Megacorp? The deal can proceed once these terms are finalized. Megacorp will be informed about the new licensing arrangements and my role in continued Phoenix development. Based on my conversations with their technical team, they're primarily interested in the technology's capabilities rather than the specific ownership structure. Robert Whitfield studied the proposal carefully. The financial terms are substantial. 25% royalties plus the CTO compensation package represents a significant ongoing obligation for TechFlow. Mr. Whitfield, the Phoenix AI system is projected to generate hundreds of millions in revenue over the next 5 years. My royalty percentage reflects the value of innovations that took 3 years to develop and represent the foundation of the entire platform. What about upfront compensation for past unauthorized use? Rebecca answered this question. We're willing to waive claims for historical damages in exchange for the higher royalty rate going forward. This approach prioritizes future collaboration over past grievances. The room fell silent as everyone processed the terms. After several minutes, Marcus Goldman addressed his legal team. Patricia, what's your assessment of this proposal from a risk management perspective? Patricia Wells, their lead attorney, consulted her notes. The terms are aggressive, but reasonable given the strength of Ms. Henderson's patent position. Fighting this dispute through litigation would be extremely expensive and could result in worse outcomes for the company. More importantly, David Thompson added, we need Barrel's expertise to maintain Phoenix's technological leadership. The Megacorp acquisition depends on continued innovation and development capabilities. James Crawford finally spoke, his voice subdued. I want to apologize publicly for my previous behavior. I made serious errors in judgment about intellectual property attribution and professional recognition. I support this settlement and Barrel's appointment as CTO. I appreciated his acknowledgement, though it came years too late to repair the damage he'd caused. Robert Whitfield closed the folder and looked around the table. I believe this proposal serves everyone's long-term interests. Madison, what's your perspective on the business development role? Honestly, Daddy, I think it's perfect. I never really enjoyed the programming aspects, but I love working with clients and developing strategic partnerships. This feels much more aligned with my actual skills. After 3 hours of detailed discussions about implementation timelines, legal documentation, and transition procedures, we had agreement on all major terms. The settlement would be finalized within 2 weeks, allowing the Megacorp acquisition to proceed as scheduled. As the meeting concluded, Angela Martinez appeared in the doorway. She'd been waiting in the lobby during our negotiations. Beryl, can I talk to you for a minute? We stepped into an empty conference room down the hall. I wanted you to know that the entire technical team is thrilled about this outcome. Everyone knows you built Phoenix, and we're excited to work under your leadership as CTO. Angela, we're going to build something amazing together. Real innovation based on collaboration and mutual respect rather than politics and stolen credit. 6 months later, TechFlow Industries had transformed into the kind of company I'd always hoped it could become. The Phoenix AI system launched successfully under my direction, generating revenue that exceeded all projections and validating the Megacorp acquisition decision. Madison Whitfield thrived in her business development role, using her networking skills and industry connections to secure major client partnerships. She'd found her passion in strategic relationship building and had become genuinely valuable to the company's growth. James Crawford had left TechFlow to join a smaller startup where his experience was appreciated, but his previous behavior was irrelevant. Industry word about his intellectual property issues had limited his opportunities at major companies, providing appropriate consequences for his actions. The new company culture emphasized innovation, collaboration, and ethical business practices. We implemented systems that ensured proper attribution of technical contributions and created advancement opportunities based on merit rather than politics or family connections. Most importantly, I'd learned that standing up for yourself doesn't require destroying others if you're strategic about seeking justice. True strength comes from having the courage to defend your principles while finding solutions that create positive outcomes for everyone involved. My story proves that preparation, integrity, and strategic thinking can overcome even the most challenging workplace situations. When people try to steal your work or undermine your contributions, the best response isn't revenge. It's building something better that showcases your true capabilities. The patents I'd filed in secret gave me leverage, but the real power came from having the vision and determination to transform a negative situation into an opportunity for positive change. Success built on stolen work always crumbles eventually, but success built on genuine merit and ethical leadership creates lasting impact that benefits everyone. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to take credit for your work or undermine your professional contributions? How did you handle it, and what would you do differently? Knowing what you know now. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more about overcoming workplace challenges and professional obstacles. Share it with anyone who might benefit from learning about intellectual property protection and standing up for professional recognition. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your work has value. Your contributions matter, and you deserve recognition for everything you create. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.